Have you ever walked into a room and it just felt right? Or, maybe it felt totally wrong and you couldn't quite put your finger on why. Well, it turns out every single room we enter is the solution to an incredibly complex puzzle. And today, we're going to see exactly how that puzzle gets solved. Okay, so let's get into it. Before a single piece of furniture gets picked out, before anyone even thinks about paint colors, a space planner starts right here, with the empty shell of a building. Now, it might look like a blank canvas, right? But it's actually packed with these fundamental challenges that have to be solved first. So, how do you actually get from that blank canvas to a real blueprint for living or working? Well, it's a process. You build it up, layer by layer, and it all starts with the most critical element of all. And that first layer, let's call it the rules of survival. See, before a space can be beautiful or functional or anything else, it absolutely has to be safe. This is where building codes come in, and they are the non-negotiable foundation of the entire process. Now, what's so wild about this is that the very first question a planner has to answer has nothing to do with how the place looks. It's about survival, plain and simple. If there's a fire or some other emergency, how does every single person get out alive? This concept is called the means of egress, and it is the starting point for any layout, no exceptions.
To solve that life or death puzzle, planners follow a really strict checklist of 6 key principles. First up, occupant load. That's how many people can be in there. Then, can the exits actually handle all those people? Are the doors and hallways wide enough? Do you have at least 2 separate ways out? Is the path to an exit short enough? And finally, are there any dead-end hallways that could trap somebody? It's all gotta work.
So, and this is so important, the entire safety plan starts with this one number, the occupant load. It's not a guess, it's not a suggestion, it's a specific calculation from the building codes that says exactly how many people can safely be in that space at one time. Every other decision about exits flows from that number. Okay, so we've made sure everyone can get out safely. Check. The next layer is all about making this space a place where people actually want to be. We're moving from just surviving to human comfort, and that means designing for our basic needs for light, a view, and, a little peace and quiet.
Let me ask you something I bet you've all felt. Ever wonder why you just feel better working near a window? It is not your imagination. We have this deep psychological need for natural light and a view of what's going on outside. It's actually so important that for a lot of spaces, it's not just a nice to have, it's a requirement.
And this visual just perfectly illustrates the planner's challenge. Look at image A. The building shell has windows all around. Easy. It's simple to give almost everyone that nice, natural light. But then you look at image B, with windows on only one side. And oh boy, the planner has to make some really tough calls. Who gets the window? Who gets stuck in the middle? The building itself can either be the planner's best friend or their biggest enemy.
All right, so we've taken care of our sense of sight. But what about our sense of hearing? Once we can see what we're doing, we need to be able to think. And that brings us to the next big invisible challenge, acoustics.
The first rule of acoustic design is just good old-fashioned common sense. Keep the noisy areas away from the quiet ones. This floor plan shows a perfect example of a strategy called acoustic zoning. See how the library and the research department, the quiet, focus-heavy spots, are placed as far away as possible from the noisy operations department? You're basically solving sound problems before they can even start. That's a great strategy, sure, but what happens when you can't separate them? What if a client's workflow demands that a loud space is right next door to a quiet one? Then what? Oh, this is where the planner has to get a little bit nerdy. A standard wall, just a single layer of drywall on some steel studs, has what's called a sound transmission class, or STC rating, of about 35 to 39. And trust me, at that level, loud speech is still pretty easy to hear on the other side. Now look at the difference a simple change can make. Just by adding a second layer of drywall, you're increasing the wall's mass. That bumps the STC rating up into the 40 to 44 range. It's definitely an improvement. The sound is muffled, but it's not gone. But for real acoustic privacy, the solution gets much more sophisticated. Here, the planner can specify adding insulation inside the wall and even separating the studs so they don't touch. This construction creates a much more effective barrier, pushing the STC rating up to where loud speech becomes basically unintelligible. It's a perfect example of solving a problem with materials when you just can't use distance. So, after tackling survival and comfort, the next layer deals with all the practical constraints of the real world, the grids, the guides, and the gear that's already fixed inside the building. For instance, take a look at this ceiling plan. In a lot of commercial buildings, a lighting system like this is already in place, and to save money, the planner has to work with it.
All of a sudden, you can't just put a wall wherever you want. It has to be placed in line with that ceiling grid to avoid creating these really weird lighting patterns, like a super bright hotspot right next to a wall, or a strange dark sliver of a tile.
Now, to work quickly within all these constraints, planners have a mental toolkit of what they call rules of thumb. These aren't rigid laws, but they're quick approximations for how much space different functions typically need. As you can see, a lecture hall needs maybe 10 to 15 square feet per person, while an executive office could take up 200 to 300 total. These little shortcuts let a planner rough out a workable layout incredibly fast. So the plan is now safe, comfortable, and practical. But is it great? And that brings us to our final and maybe most elusive layer, the art of taking a space that just functions and turning it into something truly exceptional.
And one of the keys to this is flexibility. A great planner is always asking, can this space do more than one thing? Maybe a small firm's library can also double as a conference room, or a huge banquet hall can be split up with movable partitions. By designing for multiple uses, the planner maximizes the value of every single square foot.
And this quote, this just gets to the very heart of what separates a good plan from a great one. It's about spatial quality, that intangible feeling you get moving through a space. A great planner is always thinking in 3 dimensions, imagining the view as you walk down a hall, or the impact of entering a big room. Because no amount of expensive furniture or fancy paint can ever fix a plan that just feels fundamentally wrong.
So here's the bottom line. The next time you walk into any room, just take a second and look around. Because that space you're in, it's no accident. A room is never just a room. It's a carefully crafted solution to a puzzle of safety, comfort, and function. A puzzle you probably never even knew existed.